Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me again at the Flying Goat Farm podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about how to reduce our clothing waste. But first, here's what's happening on the farm. So, we're in the middle of July, and it's kind of the doldrums of July. We're waiting for things to ripen, and so we don't really, I think we've had one tomato so far. Have harvested blueberries. Um, but none of the tree fruit is ready yet. And so everything is just kind of growing and taking its own sweet time. All the animals are doing fine. This is the time of year where, as long as they have water, they don't really need a whole lot of extra because there's lots of beautiful green grass out there to eat. Um, the chickens are getting their grain, and um, the goats that are visiting here are eating down the pastures. And so it's really kind of an easy time of year, which is nice. Usually in July and early August is the time when I kind of take off a little bit from the business and really concentrate on my own creativity stuff. And so, in that vein, I have been weaving a little bit, which, wow, I haven't woven for myself for a couple of years. So, it was really, really nice to sit down at the loom. Um, and I finished my fiber shed sweater, and I'm still working on my blanket, and just working on doing some things that are just really for me and not just for the business. So, we've been talking about um, slow fashion and why it's much better for our economy, it's much better for our climate, it's much better for our planet ecologically, to concentrate on going towards a slower fashion, to get out of this fast fashion, disposable clothing, textile trash everywhere kind of mindset that we have. um, in the last podcast, I talked about the 16 factors in the integrity index, which Greta Egan wrote about in her book Where No Evil. And my call to action was to pick 4 or 5 of those factors that were really important to you, that were like your value. If you haven't done that yet, go back and listen to the last podcast because I talk about each and every one of them. So the 5 that I'm focusing on right now are, and it won't be, I don't know that it'll be a surprise. Number 1, natural fibers. So anything that I buy from now on is going to be 100% natural fibers, whether that's wool, cotton, linen, or hemp. Um, I'm going to focus on natural dyeing and or low impact dyeing. And what I was speaking about last time is that most indie dyers like myself really do focus on low impact dyeing. When I am done with my dyeing, all that's going back into my watershed here, because we're on a septic system, is water and some vinegar. So it really has a low impact on the world. I'm going to focus on reusing and recycling and upcycling more of the things that I'm trying to get rid of. I'm focusing on the slow fashion in Egan's way of thinking about it. That was really looking for special items that would be made by craftsmen. So especially when I'm thinking about accessories like a belt or purse, those kind of things, a hat. If I was going to get like a really cool hat or something like that, I would want to have that being made by a craftsman, hopefully somebody that's local to me. And I want to focus on brand transparency, which we talked about 2 episodes ago. And many brands are putting things specifically on their website so that you can make sure that where are they sourcing their materials? Are they paying people a living wage? Or what are they doing as far as impact on the economy and on the ecology? And so I want to focus on buying from brands that I can see what their process is. And in that episode 2 times ago, I decided to look at the company called Wool and they make wool products. It's wool and nylon, so it's not totally 100% natural fibers, but they're total transparent about where their products are made. That where they are made, there's OSHA-like rules that protect the worker, that they pay a living wage, all those kind of things. And so I was really impressed by that. And it's a lightweight kind of a knit jersey material that they're making, and it's cool enough to wear in a mid-Atlantic summer. So so again, when we're making these choices, it is about, okay, it doesn't meet one of my things. It's not 100% natural fiber, but it meets many of the other values that I have, and it's something that I can wear when it's hot outside. So it's all about give and take, and again, being more mindful of the choices that you're making. So today I really wanted to talk about um, my third little factor there, which is reuse, recycle, upcycle, and the problem of all of this trash that we're generating. So I think this is the area where we as a community can make the biggest impact, I think. And that is rethinking our purchasing habits starting right now and really focusing on reducing the amount of textile waste that we personally generate. And when I say textile waste, I'm talking about trashed clothing or cloth that has already been used. For instance, what you take to donate that is not usable, so they end up trashing it for you. I'm also talking about trashed, unused clothing that would be things that are no longer fashionable because it was made 2 weeks ago and not last week. That this constant churning of the trends of what it takes to be super fashionable right now leaves a lot of clothing uh, just totally unsold and unused in these warehouses, and it gets into the landfills again. And the third thing is just unused cloth. And again, this is part of this churning of the trends speeding up so much. So unused cloth, the manufacturers had this cloth made and probably dyed and or printed and or finished with whatever finishing that's on there. It was supposed to be cut and sewn into a piece of clothing. Somewhere along the line, now the manufacturer doesn't want it anymore. So now you have cloth that is may not be cut yet, which is probable, but is a little bit usable. But you also have some items that are somewhere in that process of being cut and sewn. So you may they may throw out like 30 left sleeves that haven't been sewn onto anything. So it just becomes a lot of trash. We can also prolong the life of our clothes, and I've talked about this a little bit before. Number one is just to reduce the number of times you wash your clothes. I think we in the United States have become a little bit germophobic, and we wash our clothes way too frequently. Instead of washing them after every wear, you could wash them every 2 or 3 wears, and that's going to prolong the life. And yes, there are certainly times when you need to wash repeatedly. If it's exercise clothing, if it's all those things that there are some have tos. But if you've worn something once and you weren't excessively sweating or something, put it back on the hanger. Let it air out. Wear it again next week or in 2 weeks. Prolong the life of that because you are not washing it as often. You can also change how you wash, which is to change your detergent, to use detergent that is without color, fragrance, and other kinds of additives. All those things again can cause some problems with your body, so it's better to go for detergents that are going to have less of those chemicals in them. And change the temperature. Wash all your clothes and bed linens and towels and everything in cold water. I've been trying to get Bill to do this, but he insists on whenever he does his laundry that is separate, he always puts it in warm, and I always have to change it back to cold. And now most detergents are made to work in cold water. You've seen the commercials, so that again, with using that cold water, you're reducing the amount of microplastics that are being shed in your washing machine. And so you're prolonging the life and you're reducing the number of microplastics that go into the water and into the ocean. And finally, instead of using dryer sheets, which also have all those chemicals that are fragrance and anti-static and all those things, use dryer balls. Dryer balls reduce the time in your dryer. They also do some amount of static control. And if you really want something to smell nice, you could put a couple of drops of essential oil on the dryer ball before you put it in the dryer. I just keep my dryer balls in my dryer all the time. And they have worked for a long time. I've had the same set, I think, for over 5 years. They're really great to use. If you don't have dryer balls, you can go to our website. We have, or come over here and pick yourself up a set. All natural. Mine are made out of wool. There's just solid wool. So now we get to the recycle, reuse, and reduce. And the thing that I found alarming that I learned a couple of years ago was that when we donate clothing or cloth, we expect somebody else is going to buy it and use it, right? We're thinking, oh, it's still usable. So I'm just going to donate it to Goodwill or Salvation Army and someone will want it. Well, only 15% of the used clothing that is donated is ever is ever sold or recycled or reused. So that 85% of what we are donating is landing exactly in the landfills, which is what we didn't want. And the value of that 85% of cloth in the landfills is about $460 billion, ladies, $1 billion per year. So much of that 15% of the used clothing is sent overseas, and there's a whole economy based around this used clothing. So entrepreneurs will buy bales of clothing, and then they go through it and sell what they can to their neighbors and friends and people that live in their town. Well, in recent years, more and more of these bales are being filled up with ripped and stained and unsellable clothing. Some of them are what I was just speaking about before, the unused cloth, the things that aren't even sewn together. It's manufacturing waste. And it's causing a debt cycle among these sellers and keeping them in poverty and setting them back more and more deeply into poverty. Because they're paying a certain amount for that bale and they can inspect the outside of the bale and perhaps it even looks like they can see items. Oh yeah, there's some good items in there. They open it up and they find that in the interior of that bale there's all kinds of clothing waste, clothing trash that they can only sell for rags. Or they have to dispose of it themselves, but they pay good money for that bale. And many of them then the next time, so what they were able to sell doesn't cover the cost of that bale. So next time they want to go buy a bale, they've got to borrow the money. And if it happens repeatedly, then these entrepreneurs, they're usually women. Much of this is happening in all of it in third world countries, much of it in Africa. They go deeper and deeper into debt. What was once a really good way to make money and to support your family is now becoming something that is just putting them in further and further into poverty. And it's not doing anything to fix the clothing problem, because whatever they can't use and what they can't sell is also just going to go into that landfill. So we really need to rethink about what is appropriate to donate. And donating items that are not stained, only donating items that aren't torn, only donating items that would be used by somebody that like as is, that it doesn't need to be mended, that it doesn't need to be fixed in any way, and that it's still wearable and in good condition. So what about those things that we can't donate? We need to figure out ways to reuse them. So one way, that this is, like I just mentioned, all over the world, especially with these entrepreneurs, they can be torn up and used as cleaning rags or as rags around your house. Things to wash your car, things to dry off your dog, those kind of things. One really creative way is, especially if you have a lot of t-shirts, is that you can cut them apart and sew them together as a quilt. I've seen a lot of these that parents make for their kids who are going off to college, and maybe they are like all their sports teams t-shirts, or all the different schools that they were looking at t-shirts, or maybe your favorite band t-shirt or something like that, and sewing them together and making them into a quilt. It's a great way to upcycle a lot of t-shirts. And another thing that I thought of was, you can cut them up and use them for stuffing pot holders. And you might say, well, pot holders, why would I do that? When I was a kid, my mom taught me how to sew. And one of the very first things that I made, and I made a ton of them, were pot holders. And I used to stuff them with old towels. I would take towels and cut them into the appropriate size to fit inside the pot holder, and then do a little quilting on the outside to hold them together. And they were great presents. Well, you can do that with old towels. Of course, that's what my primary material was when I was 8, 9, and 10 years old. But you could also use t-shirts. You just have to pile them up a little bit higher. And it makes a nice product. It makes a nice gift. You can stockpile them for hostess gifts or things like that. But there's thinking about ways that you can use this material instead of throwing it in the trash. Let's be creative about it. And I'd love to hear if you have any other ideas that I haven't thought of. So mending, if you learn how to mend your clothes, and if you do mend your clothes, again, they will last for a longer period of time. And right now, there's just this new movement towards making visible mends on your clothing. If you're a certain age, we all embroidered our holy jeans in the 70s. In the 70s, it was unseemly to have holy jeans. Now you go out and buy perfectly new jeans that already have the holes in them. But it's a place where you can be creative to fix those holes, and you could prolong the use of those clothes, and also show just how creative and skillful that you are. And also, I would just say, learn how to sew on a button and invest in a sewing kit. I'm sure a lot of people might donate a shirt that was just all they were missing was some buttons. When you buy a new shirt, especially a man's shirt, it comes with the buttons. Put those somewhere so you have a little button bowl or a little button jar that you put all those in, and so that you can fix those yourself. Now, thrifting. Okay, so even though lots of trash clothing is donated, you can find lots of gems. Some of that is also knowing which thrift stores are the best ones to go to, finding out when they typically get new hauls of stuff, new deliveries. And again, just going in there looking for items that are all natural fiber. You think of for sweaters, for men's suit coats. Sometimes you can even find heirloom textiles like damask tablecloths and lacy doilies and things like that that you can use in upcycling or in other creative endeavors. And then upcycling. So upcycling means that you're not just recycling it. It means that you're going to improve it. You're going to make it something better, something more striking, something more creative. And I've already mentioned the memory quilt, but you can also use used clothing to make like bags or mittens or hats. I know many of you know what I'm talking about when I say people have gone to get sweaters. They've deliberately put them in the washer and dryer to make them shrink and felt, and then made those into crossbody bags or iPad bags, made mittens or hats out of those, made I've seen them made into vests or skirts or like a duster coat. Lots of things you can do with those all natural fibers that will felt in the washing machine. And what about all those old ties? Well, do you remember, again, I'm dating myself, those skirts that we made by sewing all those silk ties together? Those were very fashionable at one time. And of course, denim. You can always make skirts from pants. Those are coming back in style, and you can use those a lot. You can, if you don't have your own jeans with which you want to do these, again, you can shop for jeans at the thrift store and use those to make a cute skirt or little jacket or something like that. And how about socks with holes in them? This tip came from one of my listeners. Is that you cut the toe off, and then you have basically a tube, and you can use that to hold your ball of yarn, especially when you are knitting and pulling from the center. If you have a center pull ball, and then it holds all the outer piece of the yarn together. I thought that was a really creative way to use socks that might have holes in them. So here's your call to action, and I'm going to give you a choice this time. And of course, you always have a choice. I'm just suggesting that you do these things, and I hope that you do take me up on it. But here, because we're talking about reuse, recycle, upcycling, mending, so here's my call to action. You can go to a thrift store and see what treasures you can find. Or you can mend a garment that you already have. Or like, it doesn't even have to be a garment. I've been working on mending a duvet, a goose down comforter that is, I think I probably had it for 30 years. And it's still perfectly good, but it has some holes in it because it's been used for 30 years. So I'm working to mend that, trying to look for every little place that those pesky little feathers can come out. So that's number 2. Or number 3, you can recycle or upcycle something that would have otherwise gone to trash. So think about making that pot holder, or think about making that t-shirt quilt. And please let me know what it is that you did. I really firmly believe that by building this community, we can share our ideas, we can share our creations, and we can give each other inspiration. And so until next time, as always, you can leave a comment here on the podcast, or you can leave a comment on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. And if you like my podcast, please consider leaving a review on all those places. Again, iTunes, Spotify, where Amazon podcast. We also, if you would prefer, instead of listening to watch, I post these on Vimeo and YouTube. So you can also leave comments and likes there too. So until next time, happy making.